The feeling of rejection is probably the worst possible feeling that we can experience as human beings. And in this video, I wanted to introduce some studies and findings from our evolutionary point of view, from a physiological point of view, from a psychological point of view, of why rejection is the hardest thing that we can experience. But also, and more importantly, giving you some tools in order to heal. So if recently you felt rejected, maybe because of a relationship, maybe because of other things that happen in your life, watch this video and you get the keys on how you can be more resilient, how you can improve.
igetmyexpac.com. Everyone deserves a second chance.
So first of all, rejection triggers physical and emotional pain. So if we look at the study from Heisenberg, they found that rejection will activate the same part in our brain that also manages pain. It's called the anterior cingulate cortex, and it's linked to emotional distress. So in a way, when we feel rejected, it's not only emotional, it's also neurological, right? It's happening in the brain. We can't help it. We're activating the same areas in our brain responsible for pain. And it's very interesting. So mechanically, rejected is exactly the same as physical pain. Now, if we think about us as animals with our evolutions, we needed to be in a group in order to be safe, in order to have food, for protection, to reproduce. And so being part of the group is also how we define us as human beings. We always have to compare ourselves versus the group. And so being rejected from the group was life-threatening. Being isolated would mean that you will have a lot of days ahead of you to survive. And so we developed throughout the years this fear around rejection. And that's why it's still intense. So when you think about it and how our brain is very old, but yet nowadays rejection is a different form of rejection than even 10,000 years ago. But our brain is 100,000 years ago. And so what you have to understand is that we have those sort of mechanisms. They're still very vivid, still intense. The point here that I'm making today in this video is, who are we right now? Trying to uncover the meaning of rejection in your situation. Because back in the days, being isolated, being on your own, would mean less food, less shelter, and therefore life-threatening. Therefore, you live shorter. There's an element also of self-worth, because rejection feels like a judgment of your values, of your ability. If I'm rejected, I'm not accepted. If you don't accept me, there are things about myself that you don't accept, or things that you prefer in others, right? If you don't accept me, you're making the conscious decision to choose someone else, whether it's not to be with me or another person. And again, with this idea of comparison, which is really defines us as social animals, there's always an element of shame or unworthiness. So remind yourself that rejection reflects circumstances, but it's never about your entire worth. So if you're rejected in your relationship, don't think it's because you're not worthy of love. It could potentially be because your partner thinks that the relationship is too complex. When they tell you it's not working, yes, it feels like as a rejection. But it's not working in the context of a couple. When you have two people working as a team, it's not working. Yes, they're judging that it's not working, and they're taking the decision and they're rejecting you. But when you think about it for a second, there are many reasons for things not to work. And yes, it's easier to blame the other when you break up with someone, to make you the enemy, to make you the emotional one, the over-demanding one, the high-maintenance one. Because again, it's easier to be in the situation of the one rejecting the other. But that shouldn't inform you about your worth. And it's important for you to reflect circumstance versus reality of who you are. Because when you think about it, the person you were before being rejected and the person you are or were after you got rejected is more or less the same. It's exactly the same person. But you feel differently. Your perception of yourself is fundamentally different. What happens is that when we are rejected, we can't help but ruminate on things. We overthink. If I was rejected, if I was pushed away, there's something wrong with me. There's something I should have noticed. There's something that wasn't said, but I should have known. There's something I need to improve. Right? And the problem is that when you have this rumination, overthinking, that will increase the emotional pain. The definition of anxiety is basically thinking about the same thing again and again, ruminating on that thing, like a broken record, or asking yourself questions that have no answer. And so my tip, if you feel that you're experiencing this, is to redirect the focus on being active and doing something positive. Very often it's with action that you can break the cycle, that you be in the here and now, rather than, staying at home on your sofa, because this is when you'll start thinking and wondering and overthinking. If you do something, if you go for a run, if you do something, if you go out, if you won't have the bandwidth, the psychological, the emotional bandwidth to overthink on those things. And by breaking this cycle, you will start to trigger another positive cycle. Now, when it comes to future rejection, the problem is when we experience rejection, we're all about self-preservation. Any actions that we make is really about assessing the risk and reward. Any actions that we make. And the problem is that if we feel, or if we move forward with, in the back of our head, this idea of rejection, the risk involved in connecting with others, in creating a bond with someone, you will potentially distance yourself from people, or not trusting them, or avoid sharing emotion, not being vulnerable. You can also end up in cycles of people pleasing. As I'm not confident about myself, about my worth, I'd rather be always a yes person because I want to be part of the group. I want to be part of the relationship at all costs. Right? That I'll forget about what I need, what I want. It is more important to be part of the relationship, to be part of this group. My voice has no value. What I value the most is being part of this group. Sometimes we have this fear of missing out. I need to be part of this group. I need to be part of this relationship. It doesn't matter what I think. I want to be part of it. And so you have to be aware of those things, because what will happen is if you go in those relationships being scared of being vulnerable, because if I'm vulnerable, if I open up, if I trust the other one, they will hurt me, they will push me. Or if I go in this relationship and I'm myself, they're going to accept me. So if you do those things, unaware of those mechanisms, your next relationship will fail. Because you'll either be in a relationship where you're preventing yourself from building intimacy, or you're going to be in a relationship that's not really in line with who you are. And one day you'll wake up thinking, what am I doing? Why am I not, I feel like my life is on a treadmill. I'm not in charge of what I'm doing, what I'm seeing, my projects, and so on and so forth. So if you want to prevent self-sabotage, it's important to remember about the impact of rejection. There's obviously an impact on self-esteem. As we discussed, this is also part of our identity sometimes. And when you're dismissed, and that happens usually with kids, this accumulation over time of being dismissed, not listened, you would create kids who doubt themselves, who are non-confident. Because if I voice my opinion, for example, I'll be dismissed. Therefore, my opinion doesn't matter. Therefore, I prefer to keep things to myself, not to open up. And so what you should be doing is to reframe rejection rather than thinking it's negative. It's about myself. It's defining who I am. It's more about the learning experience. Because in the context of a relationship, either a loving relationship or in the context of a group or at work, there's always things we can learn. And yes, things you could have done differently. But more importantly, rather than thinking that you've done something you shouldn't, is your response. I think the key takeaway here is it's normal to feel rejected, to suffer after being rejected. But what would be the real judge of what's next is your response. It doesn't matter what happened. What matters is how you decide to deal with it. What you're implementing today to be more resilient. And not to let this experience define you. Because yes, self-esteem is something plastic. It's something that you can work on. And yes, we are social animals. And it's very hard not to compare ourselves. And so the point is to find the right balance of the things you can control, the things you can work on, the things you need to adapt, the things you have to negotiate, the things that are non-negotiables. It's so important to reflect on those things. And when it comes to healing, it's really about self-compassion. Very often we are very hard on ourselves, especially nowadays, and I don't know why, but nowadays when I look at social media, when I look at Twitter, it's important to be kind to yourself. It's important to be, rather than being obsessed about what happened, ruminating on the past, dwelling on the past, be obsessed about what's next. Be obsessed about the growth. Be obsessed about what you can learn and what you can implement from that. Rejection could be also redirection. If you think about it for a second, in the context of a romantic relationship, maybe you want to fight to get back with your ex. Maybe that's your obsession right now. But I would reframe it in, do you want to be with someone who rejects you? Maybe they're rejecting you for the wrong reasons, but that's not the point. Do you want to be with someone who rejects you? Just ask yourself the question. And rather than going against that, fighting it, thinking there's something I need to change about myself, otherwise they won't accept me, maybe just looking at like, maybe there's an alternative. Maybe there's another path. And sometimes we don't accept this path because we feel that's not for me. And it's linked to self-esteem. I'm not good enough to have those relationships, to have those expectations, to have those dreams. No, it's not true. And in most cases, we are the ones preventing us from having the life we deserve because of rejection. Because for some reason and some negative experiences, some few rejections from bad people, from toxic people, from people who are not in our team, we let them decide about what's good for us, about what should be a relationship. And trust me, there are many, many people around you who want you to improve, who want you to grow. You don't need to be driven by people who reject you. They shouldn't be the one making the decision in a way, unconsciously, but the decisions that you're making today. If you have any question about that, let me know in the comment section. I think it's a new format and I'd love to get your feedback on this. And I'll see you next time. Take care.